All right, so I guess we'll start.
All right.
So this is the first podcast that I want to do where I'm honestly just interested in a lot of topics, and I love to like find out more about what's going on in people's minds, and even for me, like if someone is like perceived, like if I think someone's boring, you know, sometimes it's like we all think some scenes are boring, but I think that's more of like a reflection of yourself than the person, right? And so that's kind of something that like I'm trying to like learn in life is like everyone has a story. Everyone is interesting. Everyone has something to tell.
Nice.
And that's what I'm trying to learn, no matter what it is. So, Lyle, we got you here today. And it's not really formatted or anything. We'll have a casual conversation. One thing I would like to do is first try these drinks.
Yes.
So let's try that out first. So we'll pour a little bit of the other one into each glass.
Okay.
Then I'll give you the can so you can try both of them.
Sounds good.
So we got Zevia here, which is zero sugar ginger ale for this one. I think, are they? Okay, yeah. So I've had this one before. It's really good. Let's go ahead and open that up. And I'll put about half of it in here.
Half? Okay.
And then I'll give you the other half for you to try.
Smells nice though.
It's a great drink. So you can keep that one for yourself. So we'll be able to try both of them. They look the same. That's so weird, right? But it's all in the flavor.
Right.
Wow. Cheers, brother. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So yours, it tastes like root beer?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
That's so
Because it doesn't look like it, right?
yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, mine tastes... I've never had ginger ale before this, so I don't know what ginger ale tastes like. But
Really?
It always tastes good.
Okay.
I kind of think of it as like a Sprite equivalent. Like, I don't know, it tastes like that. Go ahead and try it. Let me know what you think.
It really is like ginger ale. Interesting.
Yeah? Okay, I'm curious. Dude, that's so crazy.
Yo.
Yeah, it tastes like root
They're
beer.
completely separate.
But it looks
Exactly the
It
same.
looks the same. I think they all look the same. I gotta see if the orange one looks orange. Or
Yeah,
if
we
it's
gotta
like-
test that. We're gonna test that.
We might break that open like in an hour.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Lyle, you're a student at UCI,
Yes.
right? How about you tell us a little bit of like who you are, what you study? Yeah, just let us know on that.
All right, so I'm Lyle. I have my full technical is Lyle Martin. I am a third year International Studies and Asian American Studies, and I spent a lot of my time at first thinking about everything in terms of just political setting. I feel like coming into the United States as an immigrant, I was always aware of like, oh, I really like history. I really like learning about government. I love the way that I can compare where I was back home to where it is now in the US, right? And everything with that. But then as I got into my field more and more, I also realized I loved so much about preserving culture and preserving identities. And that was where the Asian American came in, which exploring the idea of like, how does an immigrant community or how does somebody who's born within an immigrant community continue to coexist within two different types of environments? How does that lived environment look like? How does it differ or change over time? Those types of things really define the way I look at a lot of my politics as well within my research, within the way I look at international studies. So one of my major things I have to do for both of my majors is to take a language. And so that gave me the opportunity to really hone in on like, I want to deep dive into East Asian culture as a whole, I would say. So I am from the Philippines, but I am Filipino Chinese. And growing up within a mixed community like that, you tend to realize how easily things can mesh, and you don't even realize it in the moment. But it's only if you look at it from the history that you realize how much hardship it took to get to that point. And so I wanted to learn about that in all other different cultures, so I started by doing Korean.
Okay.
And now this summer, I'm going to be going to Korea to study abroad.
Right.
So there's a lot of that type of thing.
Are you excited about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, like,
What's that program like? How long are you going to be there?
so it's for 6 weeks, and I am going to be taking 2 classes, but they're Monday through Thursday, 2 hours each classes type of thing to keep it consistent and sped up. So I'm really excited for it. I think that there's gonna be a lot of experience I can gain from that type of like mentality of prepping for material and learning it in a completely different context of an environment, especially within a language that I feel honestly like I don't have a grasp on yet, but I feel comfortable enough that I want to keep exploring more and more.
Sure, sure. So where are you going to be at in South Korea?
I will be in Yonsei.
Yonsei. Where is that?
That is, so within Seoul, there are
Okay.
3 major colleges, so to speak, right? They're called the Sky Universities. It's Seoul University, Korea National, and Yonsei University.
Now that you mention it, Yonsei does sound familiar.
Yeah. So one of the things I guess that I never really clocked until I started trying to think of applying is the fact that Yonsei University is the one that makes a lot of the textbooks for learning Korean.
Oh, really? Okay.
Throughout a lot of major research that's contributed to it is usually done in Yonsei. And their sister university that's connected is called Ilhwa. It's the women's university.
Oh, wow.
They are major for like archaeologic and historic research.
Only women can go, or?
It's specifically catered towards women's university, like that's their spectrum for it. And it was, I don't know the history about why it was made, but I know, at least from my experience of working within the archives of things, they are well known for storing and preserving a lot of the Korean history that was lost.
Oh, really?
Throughout like centuries ago, before you had a unified Korea. That was one of their dedicated parts of preservation.
Interesting. So is Yonsei, right? Is that how you
Yonsei, yeah.
pronounce it? So are they specialized in like international studies there?
Not necessarily, but they have a lot of international relations because being part of any of the Sky Universities, you have a lot of foreign students.
Okay.
And so they have a lot of international trade, international logistics, and then they focus it usually within the Asian context, or like how it looks like in East Asia.
Sure.
So they provide that type of resource a lot. I would say very similar to like a UCLA or USC or like UCI, like those types of UC systems or major California systems, you get a lot of international students coming by.
Sure.
So they cater it with that in mind as well.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is, so you're Filipino Chinese,
Yes.
right? But you are interested in Korean and you're learning Korean, so you're a little bit of Mr. Worldwide over here.
Mr. Asia, I guess is the best way to put it.
Mr. Asia. So what got you interested in Korean culture particularly? And like I mean, there's a beauty to every culture, right?
Yeah.
But what was beautiful about that one that you kind of are centering your future career around, or?
I would say a part of it, I'm centering a lot of things in like my interest for my future career as like baseline of my reference to how I research in Korea and how I research in China and the Philippines as a whole. But I would say like, honestly, I got into it very similar to a lot of other people through K-pop.
Okay.
When I was in like probably 4th grade or something.
Really, 4th grade?
You
got into it?
I got
That's like
into
Gen
it
3,
really
right?
early, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say like end of Gen 2, started Gen 3. That's when I
Wow.
got into it.
Interesting.
So,
I would. You said 4th grade?
yeah.
Okay, I would have been in 5th grade, and I didn't get into K-pop until 9th grade.
Yeah.
So you were in it
I was
for a good
I was
4
in
years
it
before.
Yeah. So I feel like my exposure to it, the reason why I got really into it was because it was something my brother and I bonded over.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
everything that my brother did growing up, I wanted to do.
Is this the older brother I've met?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So my older brother is very, very similar to me in the way that we expose ourselves and the way we express ourselves. But one thing that he was always encapsulated by was music. He loves music. He loves to play guitar, piano. He would teach himself songs, things like that. He would play it by ear. And Korean music was so fun for him because the way that they performed dance and the way that they performed the expression of it captivated him because he loved the way that it connected with the music itself. And so I basically from 4th grade, I just listened to it nonstop with him, and that's where I really developed that connection with like I love this music. So I guess it was definitely from there that I for the next like I said 8 years of my life, I would just listen to K-pop a lot.
Right.
Like that was my go-to music to listen to for like studying or for whatever. I think it was probably around high school though, during COVID, that I thought about it more seriously of thinking like, I'm already doing all of my years of Chinese here in high school. I love my teacher, Guo Lao Shi, shout out to her if she's there. I love learning about Asian culture as a whole. Can I do something eventually to learn about Korean? Like on a side even as a fun, because by that time, staying in a Filipino Chinese family the whole time at home, Yeah, I'm watching Filipino news not 24/7 anyways. So my Tagalog already it was improving. And then my Chinese, I had.
I'm sorry, were you born like speaking Tagalog or?
It's so in the Philippines, you grew up speaking multiple languages actually.
Right.
Technically our official language is Tagalog.
Tagalog.
But we also have official language English. So we from the get go you learn at least 2 languages speaking
least.
in majority of
Right.
the communities. And that's without including dialects.
Right. So that's what blew my mind.
Yes.
Right. With regards to like Filipino culture, not to cut you off there, but what blew my mind is because, as you know, I have a Filipino girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so I knew Tagalog was there, and I thought everyone spoke Tagalog, right? Because Filipinos are so proud to be
Yeah.
Filipino. And so I thought they were all this one unified, same culture, same group. They're all like kind of like this European idea of a nation state.
Yeah.
But you don't have that over there. So I found out she's Kapampangan, right?
Yes.
And that's not even a dialect.
Nope.
No, it's in I want to say the Malayan language family. It's like in a different language family from Tagalog, completely different language, not even a dialect. And so most people growing up are probably going to know Tagalog, right? Going to know English for mostly like business, school, like governmental things as well.
And then
or-
also they
and
have
then
their home dialect.
Their home
hometown.
dialect or language.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to me. So they
So-
had one in Quezon?
So that's interesting. Quezon is a province. It's a separate province. Quezon City is not in Quezon.
Okay.
Quezon City
Hold
is
on.
okay. So Quezon is an entirely separate province in the Philippines. I don't remember the whole story of it, but I do believe that it was a certain mayor in Manila. When they built Quezon City, he had come from Quezon. His family had come from Quezon province, so they named it Quezon City.
Is it near each other at all?
No.
No. So Quezon province is
It's not the same. It's nowhere connected to Quezon City.
where okay, I
Quezon
gotta
City
see.
is right next to Metro Manila.
Right. I know
So-
that. Where's Quezon province then?
I haven't been around there, so I can't tell you that.
Oh, okay. So it's not like
They're not connected by physical location, at
it's
least.
kind of connected. It's just on the other side of the mountain.
Yeah.
So you have Manila and then like that other strip of land on the other side
Yeah.
is Quezon, but
Quezon
it's not.
City is not part of Quezon.
Wow.
At all.
Interesting.
So within that context, within Quezon City, I should say, the majority of the language, like that is where the Tagalog people were at. Manila, that area was more of Tagalog region. So that was Tagalog. The language is named after the tribe. So Tagalog, the people, they were originating in that main area. So we speak Tagalog, and that's like the national language officially. But my dad, for example, speaks Waray. Waray is a dialect of Visayan, which is the Visayas regions.
That's in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Visayas region is where my dad comes from, and he speaks a dialect of that in Waray,
Okay.
and he understands Visayan. But even within that, if you live in Quezon City, like how my family did, you are exposed to the Chinese community. And the Chinese community, similar to like how in the Philippines you don't really have one language, Chinese people don't have one main language historically.
Right.
Mandarin is the main now because of how
Standardized,
it's standardized. It's almost like speaking common in Star Wars, right? Like that
Okay,
is a standardized
sure.
language.
Yeah.
But within every single region, there was their own language at one point. And that was different. And so mine is Hokkien or Fukian, and it is very similar to like what native Taiwanese sounds like.
Okay. Native Taiwanese, like, are we like
Like in-
Chinese Taiwanese
Yes and no.
or
It's
Formosan, like Taiwanese?
not. I would say closer to Formosan. So we have, for example, like if you were to count in between like Mandarin 一二三四五六七八九十, right? In Hokkien, it's 一二三四五六七八九十. It sounds really different.
Can I say something? That sounds like Southeast Asian.
Yes.
Almost. Because the people of Formosa were Austronesian,
Austronesian,
right?
yes.
Okay.
So it's a very different sound. And there are things that are similar that carry over, but it's not the same. And that's very similar to what happens in the Philippines where you will have people who speak Tagalog because that's the national standardized language. But majority of us back home, we will speak a mixture of everything at once. And so like Tagalog, English, our native tongues, plus maybe another language that we grew up around if we're the Chinese community or whatever,
Right.
we will mix it all together into the same sentences. So
Yeah.
we grew up basically feeling like it's pidgin. We had our own like mixture of everything at once. And so That's why, ironically, some of the best, most intelligent like language speakers suck at Tagalog grammar. Not because we don't know how to do it, but because we're so exposed to so many different languages at once
Right.
that it doesn't make sense to just use pure Tagalog. And even in government settings, all of our formal writing may be in Tagalog.
Sure.
But when we speak, or if you ever watch like a Senate hearing in the Philippines, if they want to emphasize something, they'll switch to English.
Sure.
They'll be like, da 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 da. But sir, if you're looking at this, then they'll switch back.
I've seen that in Tagalog movies.
Yes.
Like when they're like confessing love or whatnot.
They'll go back to the English.
Yeah.
Because it's a sense of like almost hitting in a different level. Now you're changing the tone of it.
Right. Yeah. I always thought that was so interesting from the few clips that.
It feels different, right? Because you wouldn't expose that in other cultures. The idea of like switching the language means you're suggesting some level of difference.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah. Because I know maybe for Spanish speakers they might do it for like convenience or if the word's not in Spanish, but
You're
saying,
sticking to Spanish majority of the time.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm not sure how we got to that from the Korean. I don't even know if we can trace back to that.
I sort of can. I have a segue, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
I think my segue for it is that I found it interesting because in the similar way where Tagalog as a language and the connection with the Chinese, it feels so different from like what we consider conventional standards of language. I think Korea has a really similar, interesting setting that once I got into it, the reason why I stuck with it was how confusingly complex Korean language felt. One of the things is that Korean is not technically even a quote-unquote Asian language. It comes from the Altaic language group.
Okay. See, so this is what's interesting to me. Isn't that just a theory?
Yes, although it's weird because yes, there's a theory, but there is physical connections that are very interesting. So if you look at the original Korea, the reason why we call it Korea is because right before Japan colonized Korea, the dynasty that was there was called Koryo.
Goryeo.
So that's why Koryo became Korea when the British came over there. So that's the name Korea, right? But before that, we actually had over 4 to 5 different dynasties fighting at the same time.
Right. So, okay, am I wrong? So I know the Goryeo, right? After, wasn't there Choson though, or something?
Yes, so the Choson dynasty, it's Koryo then Choson,
Okay.
I believe.
I want to say Choson was the most recent.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the one a lot of people like usually serialize into dramas. It's a very popular time period. But Koryo...
But then there was Goryeo. Then before that was Sheila,
Unified
Pakche,
Sheila, Pakche, Kaya.
And then
There was...
Buyo. Is it Buyo?
No, it was I forgot the name of it, but it was actually a nation states. There was one that was a group of nation states that unified together. So there was the 3 kingdoms time was basically Sheila, Koguryo, and
Right.
Pakche.
Pakche, yeah, however you
They
say it.
were fighting
Right.
amongst each other, and then China involved themselves. There's a whole story about that.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough to talk about that part.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting, I guess, is that the reason why we believe that there might be some proof behind the Altaic part is actually based on the world story. So the world, every community to some extent has their own version about how the world was created, right? Or like their nation was created, right? The story in Korea, the original oldest that we can trace back to, was called the Bear Mother story. And it's about how Tenghwa is this like emperor in the sky. He's like the gods, right? He had a grandson who came to Earth and had all this connection, right? But this grandson is eventually the starter of the Korean nation. But the legend behind that is that his father had asked, "Can I come to Earth?" And his grandfather said, "Sure, I'll let you bring disciples over from heavens." So they brought down these people, but then there was 2 animals who came over and he wanted them to join. And they wanted to join, but he was like, "But you need to be human to do it." And so these 2 animals, which is a tiger and a bear, were begging and were like, "We will do anything to become human to join you, to worship alongside you and to worship you." It's like, okay, I want you guys to go into a mountain and for the next, I think it was 30 or 40 days, you have to just eat dates. That's it. Just survive on that.
Okay, dates.
Like just the fruit.
Yeah.
And just survive on it. It's like, okay, the tiger gave up eventually, but the bear persisted. And the bear turned as a gift into a human, a female human, which he was like, but I crave more. I crave more devotion, connection, right? He was so moved by this that he fell in love with her and they had a kid. And that kid became Taegun, who is the ruler, the first official like Korean accepted ruler of Korea, of a unified
Historically?
Korea. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was their story about validating the idea that he is the first Korean ruler, like he was deserving of it because he's connected to the gods. That was their story that they created for it, right? That bear story, or that creation story, though, is very similar to what you find in Slavic countries.
Yeah, well, the reason I pointed out dates is because I don't know about vegetation in Korea, but I don't think dates are from Korea.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting connections with that. And even within some of the older tombs that you'll find, right? There are these types of tombs called Tolmen tombs, which are like, you'd have two pillars of rock and then a single rock on top of it, or different iterations depending on what type of person you were. And they're like high official ones, right? Some of these tombs, or along the time that they were being created, you would have one specifically for kings and queens, and they're basically huge mounds. But within those tombs, you would find that the crowns for them are very, very similar, if not to things that you would find within like Ukrainian history and like early Russian connection dynasty than you would with anything in East Asia. So there is a lot of connection there. Even in Turkey, they found connection with Turkish crowns where it was silver, it was like gold plates, so like circlets that are wrapped around underneath and hanging onto it. It was very similar in design to that, which we also don't have enough records of whether they traded with them or not, had interaction.
Well, because the idea also, part of the Altaic theory is that Turkish comes from the same area where Korean would have supposedly come from. And so Altea, is it Altea or Altaic?
I think Altaic.
It's somewhere near like modern day Kazakhstan or like in that steppes area.
So it's really interesting because it's possibility that there is actually still connection. Of course, it's all in conception and theory, but it's enough that up to now, a lot of professors will still talk about it in that context. And I found a lot of validity in it in the standard of the history of the artifacts that have been preserved.
Okay, yeah. So the obvious like question is like, okay, say Russian, Ukrainian, or Turkish people, they obviously don't look like Korean people. So it's not like a direct like migration. However, it's like my question is, so is the idea that this people group were all the same genetic people group and maybe the mutations of different like phonetics happened over time as part of the migration? Or is it that like just like this language was somehow transferred to like other groups in East Asia, or like how?
I would say it's interesting. I don't know what the real answer to that would be necessarily. I feel like I'm way out of my league in terms of the ancient history of it. I do believe that there's a possibility to be more of the language connection rather than physically like phenome expression.
Sure.
I do say it is possible. If you look in Kyrgyzstan, for example, there is certain regions in between the border where you have the mixture of Chinese and Russian genetics.
Yeah.
And so you can't tell necessarily unless they speak the language where they're from.
Yeah.
That is very common. And within Korea, there is actually a potential belief that the people of Shilla, so that kingdom, right, the original rulers, were actually not Korean at all. That they may have actually come from Eastern Europe.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
So there's a lot of that to be analyzed as well, because they do have some potential evidence for like the historical records suggest that they looked different, or that they had a different air about them. Maybe they were mixed, but they were taller than normal, for example. They had I remember hearing something about how their complexion was different as well, things like that. Like it suggests that there might have been different standards within that for how they got to their position.
Interesting. I'm going to pull up a video actually. There's a 3-minute video that explains the theory that I'm most familiar with. And I'll just kind of briefly explain it. Like, the idea is that, like, so the mystery to me is Koreanic language family and Japonic language family are both isolates.
Yes.
But the idea in this theory is that about 2,000 years ago, Japonic split off from Koreanic, and and Japonic actually was harbored in the Korean Peninsula for maybe about 1,000 years ago. Obviously not in how we understand Japanese today. Completely different Japonic.
But there might have been something innate within it.
There that it was harbored there until it transferred to the Japanese islands. That's with the migration of the Yayoi people, if you're familiar with that. The Japan's made up of two like different distinct I guess like ethnic groups. One of them is the Jomon people, which I think come from maybe Taiwan and are even like maybe Austronesian descendants. And I think the closest people to those today might be the Ainu people of Hokkaido, because they have more. I could be wrong on that. I don't know if it's them, because I know the people in Ainu have more like maybe like European features, honestly. So maybe they come more from Siberia, so I don't know. But the idea is that Japonic came from the Korean Peninsula, but both of them, there's two. So this is where the theory kind of starts. Is one of them was from the Shandong Peninsula. Am I saying that right? In China? Let me. I have it pulled up.
My Chinese is honestly awful. I apologize.
Butchered that.
My Mandarin's awful, so I might not even know how to say it correctly.
Yeah. If you want to kind of like see here, like this peninsula. So the idea is that I think it started here in the Shandong Peninsula, and then it transferred up to like near, like I don't know how you describe this region, but I guess like east of Beijing, kind of here. And then it went into Korea over centuries. The other theory, though, is that the Japonic family comes from Southeast Asia, and there's some ties with Kra-Dai, which I think is modern day Thai. So there's two different theories, but it's also the same for Koreanic. Like I think they're both the same, and then it split. So let me pull up a video, and actually we're on 27 minutes so far. So I'm gonna reset the cameras.
Yeah.
We'll get the video up, and then we'll go back into it.
Sounds good.
Nice. All right, so we're back on. This here is the video that I'm talking about, and I think it's gonna go by like, I think it's like explaining stuff right now, and then it goes by timeline, as you can see here. And this is, I guess, the theory for Koreanic, and I don't know if, maybe we could read like the bottom there. I'm gonna put it back a little bit, because at the bottom gives context. So this video presents two sets of opposing hypotheses on the origin and dispersal of the Koreanic languages. So the macro-Koreanic languages originated in the northwestern Korean peninsula. That's according to this guy on our left.
Okay.
And it classifies as a branch of Japano-Koreanic languages, itself part of the Trans-Eurasian language family. So I think that's the Altaic theory. I could be wrong.
It split off and its speakers migrated south to southern Korea, bringing with them Malaya culture. That is true about the Malay part.
The millet?
The Malay,
Yeah. That's how they like trace these like languages, is they see like what crops are they growing and what languages they have, I think. And so millet's like a big part of like discussing this. And so we have the timeline on top. And so it's 2800 BC.
They mentioned Chulmun pottery. Interesting. I learned about that.
Yeah.
The way it was formed. Okay.
I'll put this on 2x speed real quick, just so you can get like the general gist of it. Because I want to show you the Japonic one after too, because they're very similar.
Consistent with ancient Korean myths, especially like Jumong. Oh yeah, so interesting. Jumong is a very popular historical legend about the formation of Korea's identity. And Jumong was believed, there's like a whole documentary actually, like a whole sort of series that became really popular. And Jumong's story goes to the extent of like he was trained by like his father who was blind, how to shoot arrows, how to fight. And he was actually like a peasant born, but he was of noble descent. They just hid it from the world. I think that was really interesting about the legend and the idea of Korean culture and character.
Interesting.
Japonic speakers entered Korean peninsula circa 1500 BCE. Mumun pottery period. Okay.
The southernmost Korean peninsula living as a minority until Japonic speakers came in. I'm gonna like skip ahead a little bit. Keep going and you'll kind of see it like really split off. Japonic speakers entered the Korean peninsula in around 1500 BC. So they are different.
Mumun pottery is that was one of the major points of archaeological development for us in Korean history. When I say us, by the way, I mean like researchers.
Sure.
Yeah, I do not mean like Koreans.
Yeah, they use artifacts like how you're saying. I mean, millet, bronze daggers, pottery. That's how you trace all this history. And
The Liaoning bronze, so the Liaoning bronze dagger is one of the biggest examples of it. From my own class, they talked about it. How Liaoning specifically is a Chinese descent type of creation. So there is proof within that alone that there was already trade that early on between the two.
I think this is where I thought Buyeo came in, because Buyeo is like in the top part there, and like a little bit of like Manchuria, I guess.
Puyo and Han branches. Okay.
So this is where the three kingdoms I think are kind of starting, right? And this is like 300 0. You can see over here on this side, Kaya, Shila. So I don't understand like why these theories are like so different per se, but
it's interesting.
But I don't know. I just kind of want to show you like the start of it, like I guess where they propose it comes from. But even then, it's like that can go back even more, you know. And then where does that all come from? Even when it started. Let me show you the Japonic one, really quick, because I think it's related to Koreanic. I'm not sure though. Okay, here we go. Pull up this one. I think closer to modern times we understand a little more, but yeah, this is like these ones are very different, right? So Japonic on the right is in South China, maybe even starting near Southeast Asia, while the one on the left puts Japonic. Yeah, they splits off a Japano-Koreanic branch. So like I think this one over here posits that it's like part of the same
group.
branch. Yeah.
Interesting.
Part of the Altaic theory. Yeah, that Japanese also comes from the that same theory as the Altaic.
Interesting.
As well.
I will say, linguistically now, Korean. One thing I always grew up with was that I took Chinese growing up, and I was always told that like, oh, if you learn Chinese, you can survive in Korea or Japan because you can read the same what's going on majorly around you at least. And I do agree with that. It does help out a lot. But I will say, in terms of phonetic speaking, the style of Korean, the way it's spoken, is a lot more similar to Hokkien or Fukian than it is Mandarin.
Korean?
Yeah.
You said? Interesting.
So a lot of the pronunciations feel more comfortable from my Hokkien background than does from Mandarin. And I know for a fact, like Hanyu, which is the official name for Mandarin, comes from the Han people.
Yeah.
And they were not necessarily the majority of people who were speaking the language at the time anyways. Like they weren't the majority who were trading. I know Hokkien people, we lived near the coast. So of course we were trading the most.
Was it only in Taiwan or was that also in the mainland?
Mainland, they actually have the same. It was basically the same, except between us in Taiwan versus us in like Hokkien, we have different pitches or sounds within it.
Okay.
But the words themselves are said the same way. But it's just between us, it's sometimes hard to understand Not because we don't have the same words, but because the tone of how we say it sounds different.
And where is it on the mainland? Like modern day?
I wish I could tell you, but I have not been there, so I never really
Yeah.
got a reference for it growing up.
That's fair. So if you remember, like over here do you see like Proto-Peninsular Japonic? This is already at the time where like the three kingdoms are about to arise. So to me, it's like the people of the three kingdoms were speaking both Koreanic and Japonic, or were they like similar? Let me double check real quick. When was the three kingdoms in Korea?
That's around 100?
Yeah, 18 BC. So around that time. So this posits the Korean kingdoms are around, but this posits that the Japonic group is still in Korea at the time of the three kingdoms, even up until 600, it looks like, and then it starts to really fade away. So that's why I find it so interesting connecting Japonic and Koreanic, because to me it's clear that they have like
Connection.
some
There
sort
is
of
something.
connection, or at least they're both speaking both languages in the same time, the same area, and then by this point we can already understand Japan becomes Japanese and whatnot. But
I will say this, I guess, transition to something about like culture as a whole. There was a point when Japan had their colonized Korea. One of the tragedies, I guess, so to speak, about it was there was a desecration of how they did archaeological sites, because they were trying to find proof that Japan had a right to claim over Korea, that they
Right.
were the ancestors of the Korean people. So there is, up to now, whenever people do research about like suggesting that there was that connection, there are some people within our research who are still very hesitant.
that
about
totally makes
discussing
sense. That totally makes sense because I mean, when you're doing research, you're trying to push your own agenda, and there might be like uses of that agenda to make certain rights or claims,
Exactly.
like you're saying. So I can get the trickiness.
So
behind all
it's
that.
interesting because I don't know what to believe either.
Sure.
Especially I feel like that's the expectation a lot of people have when you come into like any field, right? Is like the more you go into it, the more answers you have. Typically, the more you go into the field, the more questions you get about why things
Sure.
are the way they are. And I think this is one of those perfect examples where it's like, I totally understand why Korea now doesn't like the idea that maybe they were connected to Japan that early, because you don't want to have that connection that might validate the things that were done before. At the same time, I also understand that like researchers have to look at it from a more objective view of like the language history, the trade, things like that. So I'd say there's a lot of speculative research that needs to still be done. A lot of more qualitative and I say more quantitative research. Something that's more hard evidence, whether it be in terms of trade or a written document from Japan's side, that may have validation for it.
That's fair, man. I've actually never thought about that. For me, yeah, I was looking at purely like I just want to know the connection,
Yeah.
but that makes a lot of sense. That it can be tricky and it can be a little, I don't want to say like dangerous, but like
There's a history that you have to address about it.
sure, yeah.
And a similar thing, actually. So it connects back to the Philippines. Bless you.
Oh.
About to sneeze? Okay, we're good. One of the things,
Right.
in the Filipino culture, I was always curious about, like, why do we eat so much, like, pork, right? So in the Philippines, we have this thing called lechon.
Of course. Yeah.
Lechon is from Spanish, because, of course, if we say lechon, we know that that's, like, from Spanish culture specifically. Lechon, there is I don't know if this is true, but it's a proposed argument that lechon was used during the Inquisition as a way to test whether someone was still Muslim or not.
Oh, yeah. Or Jewish.
Or Jewish. And the idea was that if you do not eat it, then that's the decision that you're not actually Catholic. And so amongst the Filipino communities, I don't know how much of that has really discussed, but it is a known fact that lechon and the way that we derived from it came from Spanish. But then we made it our own afterwards. We have different types of lechon, depending on which region you come from. And so if you steep that history of like the beauty of the different diversity of that food back to where it originally comes from, there's that question of like, how important is it to know about that history of the past of it? And likewise, if it is important, does that change anything about how you're doing it in the present? I guess that also formulates another completely different type of topic I could always dive into about that.
Dang. I've never thought about it like that. But I guess like that kind of gives light to like how the words that we use, one, says a lot about the culture that you're in,
Yep.
right? And like that's kind of one thing for me. Like when I am also studying like Japanese myself, a big part of like understanding Japanese culture is like first you understand the language and like
Yes.
because then you like bringing it back a little bit, we use language as an instrument to construct this world, right?
Yes.
And to assign value to different things, right? And when you study a language, you can see how people value things,
Exactly.
right? So that in itself is kind of like that's an eye opener. You know, it definitely makes sense that there's going to be histories attached to words, which can be so funny or interesting that like just a word can have a whole story to it. But sometimes I guess you just got to be able to address some things and recognize that there is a whole like holistic understanding when it comes to language and words and whatnot. Dang.
It's actually interesting because right now there's a movement in Korean language to de-Japanize, I guess the phrase.
Yeah.
Or decolonize, which is a better way to say it. Decolonize the language. So a lot of words that were taken from Japanese, they're using they're finding the archived history of the older word for it in Korean and using that instead of replacing it. For example, like one of the words that we still use up to now is arubaito. And that's when you are like a part-time worker.
Job, yeah.
And the thing is, that comes from the Japanese. Maybe within that, that's not a Japanese word.
Yeah.
That's a trading word from the Dutch.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
And and like we learned about why, it's because if you were...
I didn't even know that.
If you're working in the docks, actually, right, in Japan, and you have a Dutch trader coming by, you don't work at that dock 24/7. So you are a person who's working there only when they needed it. You were a part-time worker. The Dutch called them that phrase. I think it's very similar to the word arbiter. That's where it comes from originally. And so arubaito is a shorthand from Japanese that they use to describe themselves as I am a part-time worker here. And then that came to the Koreans when we got colonized in that. And so Korean language is arubaito.
So you call it arubaito. Because in Japanese it's arubaito, I want to say. Yeah, so that's interesting.
And then
I had no clue, dude.
Another one, in the Philippines, when you use the word barangay, that for us that means like a borough or like a neighborhood community, right? We as a Filipino community love the idea that we are part of the barangay. Barangay to us is like you have a guard there, you have all these houses, they always do celebrations together. Usually that is your close-knit community, right? The history of it though is that those were actually the names of ships. The word barangay was a type of ship, and it was one that was used by Filipino sailors, specifically for the Spanish fleet. So when the time the Spanish were colonized the Philippines, they would assemble all the families of the sailors into one group and just say, oh, you're part of this barangay, which means the ship name. Wow. And so that became part of the language. Where up to now, when we go to a place or live in a neighborhood, we call it the barangay.
Wow, interesting. Dang.
Yeah.
There's so much in language. I could see why you study the language, right? I mean, it gives you a insight into entirely different people's cultures, histories.
And I guess that's always something I've loved about language. I used to hate learning languages growing up, actually, because I think being exposed to so many different languages.
Were you like, I want to stick to one, this is too much?
I felt like, I remember I would always ask my grandparents, so in Hokkien, angkong nama means mom or grandma and grandpa. And I would always tell them, angkong nama, what language am I listening to right now? Because I would know what's being said.
Right.
But I have no idea what language I'm hearing.
Right.
And
You're trying to assign it.
Exactly. And my greatest frustration, I remember, was I would have to take like Chinese lessons every Saturday, Mandarin specifically. And I was with native speakers who spoke Mandarin already. But I spoke a mixture of random different languages assorted
so
together.
You don't know which words can I be using here.
Or what seemed to connect to. Yeah. So I just gave up and I quit really early.
Oh, yeah.
But afterwards I thought about it, I'm just like, but this is also an opportunity. Because I get to see all these different lenses to look at the world from. And I think that was the way that once I got into college, I'm like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to learn Korean, and then afterwards I want to learn all the other Asian languages and prove to myself like the beauty of learning different cultures and through the lens of their native tongue.
Do you ever get like slack from your parents? Like, you should learn, like, be fluent in
I would say
Mandarin, or what was yours particularly?
Hokkien. I feel like they don't really stress about the Hokkien as much because even at home I do still listen to them speak it and I do understand it.
Is there a strong culture, like family back?
Yeah.
In Quezon, right?
In Quezon City, if you are Filipino Chinese, especially within my community of it, you spoke Hokkien. Like that was the main way to talk to people, especially in the older community. They would speak Hokkien only. So you would learn it because you had to speak. If you want to speak to your grandparents, you had to speak Hokkien. And then so that was our experience growing up with it. But I would say like there's always jokes about like about me doing Korean and stuff like that. And honestly, to myself, I have that fear sometimes of like, am I just like trying to don on an entirely different culture? But I realize at the same time, it's like, I'm part of Lawanag, which is the Filipino Catholic. I'm like so violently.
You're still here.
I'm still violently Filipino at heart.
Yeah.
Like I know that part of me doesn't change, and I think like my Hokkien community, my dialect of it, my values, I feel like very aligned with how I grew up. My family, although we spoke Tagalog, our mentality and the way that we were taught, my mom always emphasized like this comes from your Chinese grandparents.
So what is like Hokkien culture? How is that most distinct from? Because like when you look at general, I'll just say generally like Filipino culture, right? People talk about their hospitality. You have stuff like bless, right, or manapo, and you have like those things that kind of generally define
The
Filipino culture.
welcome, hospitality.
Sure, but what is Hokkien values look like? Because you used it right now, so what's particular about Hokkien?
I would say one thing that sort of permeates it, and I guess would be a deep dive into it.
I just realized, I was wondering why the TV was going so fast. It's still on 2 times speed from earlier. Because I'm like, these clips go by fast. You were saying.
So within my family, I only learned this in college actually, but my family's history of migration can be traced back to the history of Chinese migrants to the Philippines as a whole. So there were about 6 or 7 different births of when the Chinese came to the Philippines.
Okay.
And they all came at different times.
You said?
Yeah, so it'd be like large clusters at different points. Maybe 4, be more accurate.
Yeah.
My family came at one of those major births, and it was right before the Chinese Revolution, like CCP Revolution. And so I would say that the ideals that my grandparents sort of grew up with and instilled, a lot of it was foreign within that context of like, we just moved here. We came to the Philippines, we had nothing yet. And so we had to build it all up, but we still stuck to this idea of like surviving and honoring where we come from. And that was a deep part of Hokkien culture at the time. So I think one of the major facets that's different, I would say is somewhat distinct or unique, is this really high sense of familial piety. I feel like this is a very Confucian level expression, but like the mentality of before me, my family will come first has always transcended both in the Filipino and Chinese community, but the Chinese put it in the rank of age as well. So like, for example, in a Chinese table, the first person to eat is always the eldest. No question. It should be the eldest, unless like your family says it's okay for you to not, right? And then it goes down the age rank. And so the youngest eats last. Likewise, if let's say during the Chinese culture, you want to talk or wish someone well, the different types of gifts you give are signs of that support. So for example, if you're on a celebration of a birthday, you're supposed to eat noodles, mian, because that means long life.
Long life, I've heard of that.
And so that was something that we would always do, right?
They do that on New Year's too,
yes. Right? So in New Year's, we have a lot of completely different things we do. For example, like, this is a Chinese thing as a whole. You eat half of a fish on the first day of New Year's, and on the second day, you eat the rest of the fish. The reason of it being that you nian nian yori is like the phrase where you save that half, that way you can have more for the future. And that's the idea we want to instill within your people, because it's like to save up for the future. And then you would also give things like good health, you give them apples, because like there's a connection between the language, the way it's said, and how it means health. So
it's like
phonetically it sounds similar. So they would just use those as
I've heard about the fish one, because
messages.
I almost did a short on Chinese New Year's. So I was researching how different cultures celebrate New Year's. And in Japan, they do the noodles as well. You're supposed to have it might be soba. I don't think so. I think it might be a specific noodle. I forget which one, but
something there within that.
The idea is similar. You eat noodles, but I didn't know about the apple thing. Or actually, Maybe it's only Chinese culture. Maybe there's also one in Japanese culture. But I have heard the idea of do something that sounds phonetically similar to like
Another thing, this is specifically Hokkien tradition. We have this at New Year's. We do sweepings, and so we have this tradition in my household. I've been doing ever since I was like 3, and we'd put coins all around in all the crevices. So we'd put like every windowsill, every door, every new room, every like drawer. We'd put a coin in there, and the idea is like good luck, bring good wealth for the next year, and then. Once it hits New Year's, you ring out a loud like rattler or shake to usher in the celebration of New Year. You'd cut off a bit of your hair. I don't know where that part of it comes from, but there's something in that. And then we'd have a sweeping. And when we would sweep, we'd say, Sauti Saugun, Salabote'e, Salatan Ka'e. And you're basically, the idea is like you're sweeping away all the bad, but you're sweeping in all the good that's coming in. And so for us, this is Chinese like Hokkien, I guess, community of it. Is a lot of it is steeped within this idea of tradition. We love the idea of having tradition in our community. We want to maintain it as much as possible. And at the same time, there's this sense of like a lot of traditional pride. So I think because of that, when it fed into my own dynamic of living here, my mentality for things has always been a lot about that beauty of remembering the history and the tradition and the standards of how it was taught. So even if I couldn't speak the language well, I knew what the tradition and the culture felt like. So I could still call it home. That was the ideal that's instilled.
Right. I mean, I think that tradition of like preserving your culture, especially now that you're you're an immigrant in a new community, right? In Quezon City, I think I could be wrong, but I think you've told me once before that isn't the largest like Chinatown?
Yes.
Is it in Quezon?
It's in Quezon City. So if you go to the
the world, the largest Chinatown in the world?
Might be. I'm not sure about that. But I do know that in the Philippines at least, the major Chinese community you'll find is typically in Quezon City. There's a few others as well. They actually split into like 3 main areas from what I've heard. But if you go to Manila, I would say Philippines as a whole, almost 80% of people who speak like Chinese from there or from the Philippines speak Hokkien. They don't speak Mandarin.
How do you spell Hokkien?
Hokkien.
Hokkien?
Yeah, Hokkien.
Okay, because I need to know where in China this is. So it's from Taiwan, and then it's also in the adjacent province, Southern Min languages. I've heard that in EU4. The Minnan region, southeastern Fujian province.
Fujian province, yep.
Okay.
So, Minnan. So if we want, it's interesting in my family, we have like 5 different ways of saying that we speak the language. We say we speak Hokkien. We say we speak Fujian. Minnan Yet. In the language itself is saying you're speaking it from that region.
Oh, from Minyan.
Yeah. So there's multiple ways of saying that you're speaking the same thing. And yeah, I guess that's a very interesting thing about our culture. We don't say like we're speaking one specific language. We speak it from this region. Because depending on which region you come from, you might even say it differently. That's why we have to specify the province or the location.
Interesting. It says here that, so like, just for more like modern context, that's where like Guangzhou and Zhangzhou is from. Probably saying those wrong, but that's like the modern varieties of it. Well, is Hokkien like, I guess like on like an evolutionary like level of like the Chinese language, would you say it's more like traditional?
It is one of the older ones because the Min Dynasty was way before what the Han Dynasty became when they were in power. Like in terms of like tradition, the Min Dynasty was our region specifically Fujian. We were home to the original people of the Min Dynasty. So we have a lot of like nobility and royalty there. So the Min people were both the traders and the scholars.
Interesting.
At least that's how we were taught growing up.
Wow. Okay, so in like Hokkien, do you guys have like food? Did you grow up with Hokkien food or?
Yeah, I would say I grew up with a lot of Chinese food as a whole. I can't tell whether or not it's from Hokkien specifically because that was one thing I always regretted. My I was born right after my great-grandparents had passed away. So I never got the chance to really interact with them about where their language came from. And my grandma learned the cooking of all of these things by watching my great-grandma. So she never got the chance to really ask her the origin of where it came from, just so she did it.
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure that a lot of things I did eat at home that were Chinese are directly from there.
Sure.
But even then, I can't validate that, for example, right? Like we have onion pancakes, but that's also conventionally Chinese.
I know that Taiwan's pretty popular for that.
Yeah, we have like egg drop soup, which I know a lot of different Chinese iterations of it, but then we have our own version.
To be fair, I mean, we are talking about a time when things were probably more localized, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously, your great-grandparents, right? And this would have been before the Communist Revolution?
Yeah, so they came in around the 1930s.
Yeah.
So there was, like, that was right around the time it was starting to even begin. So by the time that, it was actually interesting, my great-grandfather, by the time he came back to China, it was a completely different regime, and he didn't like it. So he actually was a really prominent figure for Sun Yat-sen and for like the fight for Taiwan. He became like a liaison for them in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
He rose up really high in the ranks of that. So Chiang Kai-shek, like one of the schools that we have in the Philippines, up to now, is still called Chiang Kai-shek.
Wow.
And it's like an educational school where they really teach you both Chinese and Filipino and English. Like it's all of the different cultures of it, right? And they still teach that there. And my great-grandfather was like, oh, I'm sending my kids there, and I'm also going to help fund parts of the school.
Wow.
So that's where it comes from. So like there's a lot of that history involved within that dynamic in my family.
Wow. Dude, that's so fascinating to me, because I mean, we're talking about one immigrant group from Quezon City, right?
Yeah.
Imagine all the different immigrant stories there are across the whole world.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing I guess that like, I think it's very wrong to say that we did not live in a multi-plural world.
Sure.
Ever since the beginning of human migration, there has been immigrant movement. There's been integration of culture. I think that was one thing that I always got frustrated by when I first came here. Was
to America.
And also within the
How
Philippines.
old were you?
I was 3.
Okay.
And I think it was like when I first came here growing up, I didn't really think about it until maybe like somewhere in my elementary school years, where people were saying like, I want things to be authentic. And I remember being like, oh yeah, I do know that there's some level of like authenticity in things, but also how can you say that was authentic if it was maybe inspired by something else? Like I remember somebody saying, I want authentic Chinese food. And then they ordered orange chicken. I'm just like, no,
Right.
that's not like, but then again, I thought I'm just like, it's not, but then Chinese people sell it. And there's a reason for why they have to sell it. Like there must be some, so the question became like, what counts as authenticity?
Yeah, that is interesting, right? I mean, like orange chicken's a specific example, but orange chicken, doesn't that come from like, I don't know, like General Tso's, like, you know, orange flavored chicken?
And even
there has
the
to
name.
be some sort of like reason it's associated, right?
It's similar to like how when people talk about what's American food and they say French fries, you probably just like,
Yeah.
it says French in the name.
Sure,
Or like
right.
hamburgers from Hamburg in Germany.
Do you know about that story too? Because what you were talking about earlier was, oh my gosh, I forgot. Oh yes, the decolonization of Japanese influence into Korean language. Do you know that during World War I, America also had that initiative as well?
Interesting.
They decolonized German words from American language. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so hamburgers, obviously, like Hamburg, right?
Yeah.
The city in Germany, became Liberty Burgers, right?
Oh.
Yeah, hamburgers became Liberty Burgers. Frankfurters become hot dogs.
Hot dogs, that's
you
where
know,
it came
so there
from.
was a more Americanization of these popular German cuisines. Because it was a sense of like, you know...
We want to be American. We want to be prideful about it.
Yeah.
There's the fact that's why I think I love joining language so much, because I think a lot of the regrets I have about the way people posit the world right now is that there's a lot of people who don't really want to learn other languages, or they don't see the need of it growing up because we don't educate the importance of it. I think the reason for it is that people hammer home, oh, this would be good for a job, this would be good for employment. I think scrap everything worrying about like telling kids you need to get a job secure in the future. At the baseline of it, learning another language not only does help you communicate with other people, but you get to look at the world through a different set of eyes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that to me is so impactful. Like, I used to think that I was good with just learning English because everyone spoke English.
Right.
And then I got to a point where I would go back home and I would be missing out on things that they were saying in Tagalog. I would go back home, or I would talk to like my great grandparents who didn't get the chance to, like on my grandpa's side, and he would speak in Hokkien, and I couldn't understand them. Or especially within my own family, when I went back home to the Philippines, I was probably around like.
You know what? I need to switch the battery real quick.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I might have forgot to check the batteries. I don't know where we had left off in the I think it was 3 minutes. Maybe we're lost. Potentially, I can still pick it up from the microphones, and maybe we'll just like go off for a little bit. Or I'll do some cool editing. I'll put like some visuals of what we're talking about, right? So hopefully it still catches or picks up. But continue where you left off, yeah.
So I would say like, when I went back home to the Philippines, I got to see the grave sites of my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. And within my mom's side, they were the matriarch and the patriarch of the family. They're like the building blocks of everything that we got to do, right? And I remember being there, and one of the things that you do in China, which will lead into my Catholic talk, I guess, about ancestral veneration of it.
Right.
We get engaged in that. And I remember being there being like, I wish I could talk to you in a way that you could understand. And that was, I guess, my framework of realizing like the language, it's not about learning just the language that matters. It's about when you learn about speaking to someone in their native tongue, that's the language of love that's coming out, not just their native language, because that's how you get to reach someone on a level that they wouldn't normally get to.
Man, okay. You opened up another thing. I have like 3 things I want to ask you, and this could go off into 2 more hours of wherever. Because, oh my gosh, okay. I'm gonna try to ask the 3 things.
Okay.
And we'll try not to do another 12 hours.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so for the first one, I do want to bring back from an old thing we're talking about, related to this. So we were talking about how for the average Filipino, you might know 2 languages for sure, most likely 3. And so you have Tagalog, English, and then
Probably your home language,
and then
or
your
wherever
home
you're from in your province.
language.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, with globalization, with the internet, things become standardized.
Yes.
A lot of tradition can be lost. A lot of like things that are closer to home might be forgotten sometimes. Where do you see the future of language in the Philippines? Do you feel like a lot of these home languages might become lost given time? I mean, you could apply this to any country, but
I would say in the Philippines, I'm glad to say I don't believe it will be majority of them, at least the ones that are spoken normally. And the reason why is because a lot of people, at least from how I've experienced it so far, when you go back home, they will speak Tagalog if they need to at school, but at home they're still speaking their native tongue.
right.
And I think there's something beautiful about that, where it's like you have the formal and then you have the when you're comfortable, right? And I think there's something about that is really emphasized within the community that I really do respect. And it does, I will say, if anything, Filipino culture within the Philippines has proven to me that there is a way to use the internet as a way to preserve rather than to lose. One of the most beautiful examples of that is there was this Filipino group. I forgot the name of them, but if you do find them eventually, you can put it up on like or show it on the side of the screen or anything. But they did this song where every verse was sung in the native tongue of the
members
from the different regions.
Okay.
And so you would listen to it and you'd have the different verse. Some of it would be in Tagalog, some of it would be Visayan, some of it would be in Kapampangan, Cebuano. There's so many different ones that they were using throughout it. And the whole idea was that you can still be Filipino, you are authentically Filipino, and you are still at home.
Right.
And something about that just to me felt very warm and welcoming. And I guess that was something that I never really realized how much I took for granted when I came here into the US, where everyone speaks English. Like, yes, you may have different accents, you may have like different grammatical patterns, but we are still all Americans speaking English. Whereas in the Philippines, if I go maybe like 4 hours down, it's a completely different language.
Yeah.
And there's something beautiful about that. Also shocking, I guess, coming from the American experience now, that I'm still trying to process, but I think it's really beautiful.
Wow. So, I think coming from you hearing the reason you started learning Korean
Yeah.
is because you wanted to. I mean, language gives you an access to a whole nother way to perceive this world,
Yeah.
right? Through a different culture. I think that's beautiful. For me, do you want to know why I started learning Japanese? Was because my ex-girlfriend was Japanese and she would talk about me with her Japanese friend behind her back. Or actually behind my back, but in front of me.
So you'd want to learn Japanese.
So I wanted to know, like, okay, what are you guys talking about, right? So that's why I started to learn, but then from there it became more like I was exposed to it, but then it's a recognition of what you recognize. Oh, I'm not just learning language; I can learn a culture too, and I can learn a history, and I can learn about the way these people, the way the Japanese people. Experience their daily life, and you start to learn some of the words that like give such a perspective to the things that they encounter, and the same for every language and their story. So for me, it was a silly reason as to why I got into it, but I stayed for a different reason. And I mean, a lot of people think that I stayed for it for like anime or whatnot. I actually wasn't really that much into anime growing up throughout high school. I'd watch it from here and there, but for me, the language itself was just so fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about a blending of cultures with Japanese, you know, as you know, you have kanji, which is Chinese influence, right? But then you have hiragana as well, which is, I want to say a Buddhist monk derived it in maybe around the 12th century. It could be 8th century, even earlier. I'm not sure. But to like standardize the Japanese writing form.
Yeah.
And then katakana as well, which we use mostly to describe foreign words for the most part. Sometimes if the kanji is really complicated, they'll use katakana just to simplify it, like, you know, on a street sign or something like that. But yeah, and what you were mentioning earlier with arubaito, coming from Dutch, I had no clue that there was that story, but I have learned other words in like Japanese that tell stories like that, and that's like a testament to just language in general and its storytelling. For me, Japanese is just like so fascinating in that you have to use the 3 different scripts all at once in the same language. There's no spaces, but that's how you chunk each part of the sentence together. And like at first, like that's kind of complicated, but for me, like that was just kind of the cool challenge about it. I remember in my junior year of high school, I actually started learning Korean because I got big into K-pop as well. I'm like, maybe I should just learn Korean. I'm not really doing anything much with Japanese culture. Like, you know, I'll just learn Korean. I listen to the music. This will be helpful.
Yeah.
But then I was a month in and it was so complicated, man. Like the grammar, like I thought Japanese was hard, but like the grammar for Korean, like the alphabet wasn't too bad. Alphabet was pretty simple, but I just could not get like the grammar. It was so different.
So I guess I give a little bit more context about it. Korean grammar is designed in a way that I guess there's pros and cons of it, right? A con is that if you did not catch what was said at the beginning of a sentence, you may end up having no idea what was being said by the end of it. But I would say a really beautiful pro about it is that Korean grammar works in such a way that the entire context of the sentence is revealed poetically almost in the end of the phrasing. So at the very end of your sentence, you may have a difference in the statement, and that completely changes the connotation of who you're speaking to, of what you're speaking about, of when you're doing it.
Yeah.
Example I always love using, right, is like the 3 degrees of love. So, for example, let's say you're talking to someone who is very formal, or you don't want to show that you're like way too close to them. You say 사랑합니다 to show love, right? If you are closer to someone, like maybe a friend or something, right? You say like 사랑해요, like you love them. It's like, so it's a little less 합니다, not like as full bow sort of extravagance, but still some courtesy, right? But if you want to say that you love someone, like you're just there, 사랑해. So it's the levels of formality and levels of closeness is a good way to put it, I guess, right?
Familiarity.
Yeah.
As well.
So there's this really beautiful thing I saw in a K-drama actually that my teacher used to explain this, right? Where there's this girl and she keeps saying like, you know, this entire relationship is impossible, we can't do it. And he starts saying 사랑합니다. And so she responds saying like, just because you love me doesn't mean you can't. And he stops her saying 사랑해요. And then she's like, but what if this doesn't work out? And then she says 사랑해. And then his whole thing is like, each time you're saying something that's harsher, I'm gonna get closer and closer to you.
That's crazy.
So there's levels in that in the grammar.
Yeah.
Suggest different things, right?
Sure.
I think that's something beautiful. I found that as my joy in the challenge of Korean, where it's like, I've never experienced it in any of my other languages.
Sure. Yeah.
And I want to explore
we don't have that.
Exactly.
In most Western languages, at least for English.
Yeah. And so something about that just drew me to it as well.
Japan also has similarities with that poetic revelation of what the actual sentence means
By the end of the sentence.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of inquires you to pay attention to what's going on all the time. I feel like in English, maybe we could start a sentence and then
just trail off,
and then trail off, and maybe I'll pop back in again. But no, you have to it kind of forces you to be in constant
actively participating.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that until now. But yeah, I mean, with Japanese, all the, if you want to know if something's future tense, past tense, if you desire it, different like that, it's right at the end. You have to wait.
To know what's going on.
Yeah, to the end of the sentence. Yeah, dang. Dude, you're making me realize a lot of things I'm working with, and I never knew were there. That's so crazy. Yeah, the Japanese is. And Korean and many languages has their beauties to it. I know with what I love about languages other than English is that they put so much beauty in words. Like English standardizes a lot of stuff. If we want to say oh, that's a beautiful blue dress, we're gonna say a beautiful blue dress. But I had a French friend who was telling me that there's a word for beautiful blue dress, just one word for that phenomenon of existence, right? And that's what's beautiful about many languages is they don't standardize sometimes, and in Japanese as well, they have entire phrases for a certain phenomenon. I don't know if I could come off with any on my head. I know if you want to describe your traditional dainty, maybe young feminine woman, you'd say Yamato Nadeshiko. I'm not sure what Nadeshiko, probably child or girl. I'm not sure what Nadeshiko is. Yamato refers to the traditional kingdom though of Japan, right? That would have existed thousands of years ago though. But I like that there's a beauty of these words that have such big meanings in other languages. Yeah.
Actually, I guess this transitions this into the more the language of love and whole idea of something I gave a talk about in Liwanag. But in Tagalog, there is this beautiful thing. I guess there's two words I always love talking about. My girlfriend Cassie always mentions it to me. One of them is kilig. So Filipinos are so in love with the concept of love. To us, we haven't.
You beautifully transitioned this because this was the next thing I was going to ask you about.
Perfect. I'm locked in.
The next thing was I was going to ask you what's your definition of love? What do you think about
Oh,
love?
I got you.
mentioned it earlier. That's so wild that you.
I got you. I'm locked in.
That's so crazy.
So
go ahead.
We're so entranced with the language and the aspect of love that Filipinos the language is so romantic by nature. For example, if you want to say forever, to have something forever with someone, right? There's one way to say it, which is just forever, right? There is a poetic way of saying it, and it is one of the most popular versions of it. If you listen to Adi, is he does it in a song called Parluman, and he says in a phrasing of at the ending of the main chorus, "Sasayaw kita hanggang sa walang hanggan." I will dance with you until there is no more until. If you keep turning the page, the until, right? Until we run till there is no more left in the universe. Hanggang sa walang hanggan is a way to say forever as well.
Wow.
And there's something about that just encapsulates me in language, right? And it leads into another way of Filipino cultures loves love so much. We have different ways to describe love depending on who we're speaking about it to. So if we're saying let's say you're watching your best friend fall in love, right? And you get excited for them, or you get the butterflies, right? You're let's go, right? That's called kilig. And we have a phrase for that because it's so common for Filipinos to find love and joy in seeing other people fall in love or having those moments, that we express a word to describe that.
Is it, so are you describing the process itself, or are you also describing an emotion that you're having too? Like, I love
Both.
this for them. It's
Both.
yeah.
So even, for example, like, I think you've probably seen your girlfriend do this. If she's around the other girlies and they're teasing her like, oh, that guy was looking at you, ang kilig. The meaning behind ang kilig is like, oh, that's so, like, the thing of it, like, it's such a movie perfect scene. We think about it in that context.
Yeah.
So we're entranced by that, right? And when we say we love to someone, right, we call them mahal. Mahal is a way to say something is precious or expensive. So when we describe someone as my mahal, my precious, it's as if to say like, you are so much a price cannot explain this love I have for you.
Oh, wow.
So my mahal, like if I call Cassie like mahal, kamusta, like how are you, right? Mahal in that sentence literally translates to like my precious, the thing I cannot express the price of. How are you?
Is that the same mahal kita?
Mahal kita.
What does kita mean?
Kita is you.
Okay.
Mahal kita, I love
So
you.
you that I...
Yeah, you that I have
Like-
such, that holds so preciously.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so
And
crazy.
I think that's something about that. I guess it's, if I were to describe my concept of love, right? Love is, it's interesting. I think love in itself is the ultimate language. I think that the ultimate goal of life, no matter how you do it, everything you do is a form of language. Whether it be a physical work, let's say you're working in your career, right? You have to learn a language for your job. You have to learn lingo about how to work with bosses or how to work with other people. Or if you're a construction worker, you have to learn the lingo of your job, what you requires. Maybe the different types of hardware, different types of plywood, different types of construction gear, right? If you are a data scientist, you have to learn entire codes of Python, of C+, C#, like all these different coding languages. Everything in human communication and the desire to connect with other people breaks down into language. And also it's a way to express human existence, how we express ourselves, right? Language of love is the highest form of that. Because I personally believe that love is the essence of everything that is, even its opposite. I feel that to some extent, to hate something is to love the idea of being against them. That to be angered by something is a form of love where you feel like there is something that you love and then you feel that was done wrong and you feel angry about it. So there is, no matter what it is, you can apply love to some concept.
Wow.
And I think that in that sense, life in its entirety feels like a pursuit of love. I'm very poetic when I talk like
so that concept that you just explained there, I'm sorry, was that unique to like how you view things, or was that from Filipino culture?
I would say it's a mixture of a lot of things in my life. I grew up very driven by words. I used to read so much. Like I'm the type of person who like an avid romantic at heart. So I would read every single book I could find that talks about like fantasy, running away from things like Tolkien, one of my ultimate inspirations of it, right? And I think like the best way I could describe that type of love is, I feel like an Aragorn's type of love. A man who is so willing to fall in love and marry this girl of his dreams, that she was so willing to love him, that she was willing to become, from an elf, become mortal and willing to die. And he was so willing to love her and to marry her that he became the king of two separate kingdoms to unite them, to prove a point that this is the type of person I'm willing to fight for love. That's love in its highest form, right? And that's how I see it as well. Language of love is the end game. So if I were to describe love, I would say it is the ultimate form of language. Because when you can speak to someone beyond physical word and it's the love that you express, that love, no matter what language they speak, they will receive it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've recently heard like a phrase that, so like, how do you define love? Love is everything that unifies.
Yes.
Right?
I would say so.
Yeah. And so you look at like, okay, well, let's look at that in an opposite manner. So what takes us apart? What doesn't unify us? Pride, right? You look at pride and okay, so pride separates us. So you kill pride, you kill your own ego, and you will the good for the other, and that's what unifies you guys. And when you think of something that's unified, that means you're like one thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I guess like to love someone is to like kind of become them, or like to maybe to to exist in a state that's like harmonious with them, or to become this one unifying thing. Like I thought that was kind of enlightening when I first heard about
And
that.
I think a big part of that is that like I think a lot of people misconstrue that love should be easy. I don't believe that. And I think the reason why it's hard is because we as humans are annoying and difficult and complex.
Of course.
And so within love, I always bring it down to this idea that like love doesn't mean that everything will be harmonious. But love means that even in the disharmony of it, there's a beauty within it. And so one of my perfect examples of that is like when you said pride, ego, anger, all those things that might seem negative, right? Every human has something negative about them to some extent.
Sure.
But love works in such a way that even in our imperfections, we may find alignment. And even when they don't align, we are still willing to work beyond it. One of the most poetic ways of looking at it, right, is that I see it as love is a chisel and we are the sculpture that it is being made from it. So when someone loves you, they chip away a bit at what you think you are and reveal the real you inside of that marble.
Sure.
And I think like by the end of that, you may not be perfect, you may not look exactly, but you are you, and that is the entire you that is made from love. And I think there's a lot of things that people always tell you. I grew up being surrounded by people who'd give advice, and so I remember when I was younger, I grew up with a reservation for getting advice from people. I was like, I want to live my life my own way. I want to do my own thing, right? One of the biggest things I would get frustrated by is the fact that like when people talk about love, they give completely opposite suggestions about what to do. So when I would ask people like, oh, when I first started courting Cassie, I was like, how do you do this? What is the steps? And they would give me like, oh, you should go all out on this, to be really expensive to go on a date, like make it sentimental, really impactful. And then the other person would be like, nah, screw that. Let's just keep it really ground-based. Do whatever makes her feel comfortable. And outside they'd be like, oh, but you gotta push it out because it tests the boundaries or to make sure that you guys are familiar. And if you go to all the hard stuff first, it makes it easier. Other people say, let's take it slow and easy. It's like, you have all these, and I think the reason for it is because the language of love is not, the beauty of it, I think that it is beauty, is that it is not a singular action or singular straight way about it. In the same way that when you speak a language, you have 30 different ways of expressing the same thing, love will come in a million different ways about how you express it to another person.
Sure.
But it unifies you to that person.
Right. Well, I think that's where the unity comes from, is when two people are reorienting like their lives, their priorities,
their languages
goals
to that love.
Right. Yeah. That's what the love is. It's like you said, it's not one singular action. It's not a feeling. It's a reorientation of like who you want to be with this person, and it's a continuous action that doesn't end. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's a complete like. I mean, obviously, there's, like you said, there's gonna be faults within us, but I think it's like the idea that we love each other because we're before this journey that we see greater than ourselves, and that's like the love that unifies us.
Exactly.
I think about it. I think about it with God now, right?
Yeah.
What's it like to love God? To love God is to orient your life towards Him, right? That means, that means sometimes shoving away your own pride or like what you want for yourself, this or that, your selfishness. And
I mean, we're going through Lent right now, so of course.
Right. Yeah, and reorienting your actions that show your unity with God, and that's what love is.
I think one of the most beautiful ways I remember hearing about it was the idea that like love is not the feeling, it's the commitment and the devotion.
Sorry for that interruption.
No, you're chilling.
Battery died. Okay, so where we left off on
language
God.
of love and God.
Yeah.
I would say one of the most beautiful ways I heard about it with love is that you'll know that you love something when you realize that what you consider a sacrifice is seen and now it's just like something normal for you. And I think like within God's standpoint, especially coming from a Filipino culture where we grew up being Catholic, I guess I never really took that to heart until after I really got older and learned about the sacrifices my parents made. And I was like, this is a form of God's love in my own life, right? One of the things in Filipino families you'll see is very common is that Filipino parents will sacrifice everything for their kid. Everything that they will hold on to will go to the kid, no matter what. They will shed the clothes of their own back if needed.
Wow.
And I think in my own family, I remember my mom, she had this really beautiful story about how like she never intended for us to come to the U.S. at first. She was like, we'll see if it happens, if it does. And then God just aligned all the ways eventually we're like, okay, we are going to the U.S. now. But she had to lose a lot of her security and her comfort of everything back home, right? And she had to build everything new here. But when I asked her, like, was it difficult? She was like, it was for you guys. That was her way of looking at it, that it's for you, so why would it be hard? I think that was like, it was hard, but it was all for you, so it didn't matter. I think that was the first sign of like my real first glimpse about what falling in love with God felt like. Because I see that in the same way of like, where I would ask God, would it be difficult to offer up your son? Was it difficult to go through all the things of like setting a prophet, and just people turning away? And his response would be like, it's for you guys. This is all for you. And so I guess I don't have a glimpse of it yet because I'm not a parent. But there's a part of me that knows that like once I do feel that moment, I'm going to get a little bit deeper of looking at the language of God's language of love.
Wow. Yeah. I've heard that before. I think it was the comedian Dave Chappelle who said that like when you become I hope it's his quote. This could be someone completely different.
Yeah.
But I think it was from him that I heard like when you become a father or a mother, probably even more a mother, but it increases your capacity to love.
Yeah.
And you'll love to an extent that you didn't know you could love. And I think that's powerful in itself there.
Yeah.
And like kind of how you're saying, like when you have kids, like the love that you understand from God as well changes in a different manner.
Oh yeah.
That's something that like kind of I've been on my own journey about in understanding God's love. Something that I've talked about before has been, I want to know what it's like to. I want to first of all I want to know what like love is. Twice song, what is love?
Yeah.
Right. But and then I realized as children we start our understanding of love how we receive it from our parents. Right. That's the only outlet that we have. Or not the only outlet, but like that's how our understanding of love begins. Is how we are loved and how we receive love. And I think a big part of that is who you are as a son or daughter of God and understanding his love for us. I mean, the famous, what is it, John 3:14-16, that he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, something along that phrase. And then you start to understand the love that God the Father has for us, and you see it through his creation, right?
Oh,
through
yeah.
his intentional design. When he created the world, he created the stars, he set everything in motion with so much design, and knowing that one day humanity would be in dominion of this great creation, but also in service with it as well, and this is like the design that God had intended for us since from the beginning. That this is the love that he had from us. And then fast forward in the theodrama, when Christ was always there. Christ is the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was always there, but when he sends his son and becomes flesh, it shows another aspect of God, the Father's love, as you were saying, like, this is just what I have to do in my sacrificial love. I'm sending my son, and what Jesus does, and his life, death, and resurrection shows a type of divine love, but also a human love, which is an understanding that enters the picture for us humans. We see his sacrifice and his love, and like that's inspiring for us, and and it helps us understand on a human level how we can treat our brothers and our sisters, how we can treat our own children, how we can treat our parents. And Jesus' actions ultimately are done for us, and they're done out of like a same respect for his Father as well. And that's something that I think that we as humans can learn from. It kind of begins with this father or this parent, maybe child dynamic, and our understanding of love starts from there, and then we go out into the world and we use that understanding to share that love with others, and then one day you'll have your own set of kids if that's your calling. I think as Catholics, our vocation, at least for the majority of people, are either going to be priesthood or having a family. And in both scenarios, you see how there's that paternal love or maternal love, and I think that that again is a gift of expanding your capacity to love, and then that introduces a whole nother understanding of what love is, and I think like for me, I'm at a stage in my life where like it's like kind of surprising, like like you don't realize how much your parents did for you. And you can take that to a theological look as well, how much God did for us, but how much your parents did for you, that you just kind of maybe as a kid, and it's okay as a kid, you probably expect it. You like, this is what you're just been brought into. Everything's handed to me and whatnot. But then you learn to appreciate it and understand that, like, oh wow, like my parents, like for my father, he drove to work. He commuted an hour and a half there, probably an hour and a half back every day for like 20 years or something like that. And that's a type of sacrifice, like you were saying. Like it's not that like this is something that you have to do for your kids. This is just what it is, and you're so like, this is the love that you can present, and God's going to increase your capacity to love as well, for the sake of that child, for the sake of you, and growing that relationship between the two. And it's so interesting. It's beautiful.
I think one of the biggest parts of that, I guess, is like, as we're recording this, actually, it's my mom's birthday.
Oh, what? Happy birthday to her.
So shout out to you, Mom. I love you so much. But something I guess I've run through my head about that is like, I think as kids, you never realize how hard it is for your parents until you're older and you try to ask them. And even then, it's hard to accept how difficult it was. Because I think one of the biggest things is like, why would you do all of that for me? Or why would you do that for anyone, right? I remember one of the biggest examples of that when it comes to like love and what it means to have that type of love is the idea of like immigration as a whole. What would compel a person, if it's not of their own desire, to go to another country, to uproot everything that they know as home for even just a chance at a better life? What is the cause of that? And the answer of it is there is a love that transcends beyond the basic logic of our own human desire. I think that in that same context, if you want to learn anything beyond even just religion, right? If you want to learn what the true meaning of life is, look first at what makes humans even live in the first place, and the answer to that is love. Look at what makes them decide to do things that make them irrational. Look at what they do that decides to give them purpose or action, and 90% of the time it's going to be love. It may not be love of something that we always see as positive, but it's still love nonetheless.
Yeah. Wow. What a talk on love. You were continuing to bewilder me, because like I had like a list of themes I wanted to bring up, and then there's like other themes that like I wasn't sure, like how can I interject here and there, and then you're able to just kind of like weave it all in. And
I think that's just my personality.
But it's who you are. I mean, I think from when I began to know you, you give off this vibe of like a poetic expression of love from the beginning, you know, whether it's for your brothers or sisters, your, you know, your community and your family, for God. You can see that interest that you have. Yeah.
I think a part of it is like, I grew up surrounded by books. And so I grew up around fanciful wording. But I think outside of that, it was also this thing of like, I as a person got really good at realizing that if I didn't know what to say, I could just fluff it. So I was really good with, when I was younger, of just like being in debate and everything. I would be like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Watch this. And just go off on words and arguments that may not even have made sense, but they worked because of the sound, right? And I think that was something that taught me about the importance of projecting the message. And I guess now that I do have the vocabulary and understanding of things I want to pursue, it just locked in those two things together. So now I see that like everything in life to some extent has some connection or chain to something else. It may not be like it's necessarily correlated to one or the other, but that there's a string or a line, I'd say like a pass between them that connects things in life so that it makes sense at the end of it all. Like one of my funniest stories I always like to give about college is that I wrote a poem for my application for college.
Oh, really?
I wrote a poem about how I wanted to unlock and preserve the history of my great-grandparents and how I wanted to honor them in college, right? And I gave it to my English professor, or teacher at the time. And he was like, this is a really big gamble. And I said, okay. Like, I had no second thoughts about it.
It is quite the gamble, yeah.
But I applied to every single college that I applied to. I went for psych, and I went for film, because I loved film. I love the art of, actually I got really into it because of Corridor Digital. So a lot of VFX, a lot of behind the scenes editing, the story of like why this works. I love that part of it, right? And I love psych because I wanted to learn about the human person. So I applied for every single place there. And then when I came to UCI, my parents were like, maybe you should choose something different. They were just like, you know, I love that you're going to film. I also don't know if it's sustainable. Please choose something that like, that aligns more with you naturally. So I was like, okay, international studies sounds cool, sure, whatever. And I put it in there. And I put international studies in psych. The only school I got accepted into is UCI. And it was for international studies, not even the psych.
Wow.
And so I was looking at it, I was like, God, I didn't even know how to feel when it happened. I was just like, okay, I guess I'm going here now. This is like what God told me. And so I came here and I immediately fell in love with it because one of the first classes I ever took, they were like, if you want to learn about the world and understand why it is that things are important, not just the importance of them, but also why they became to be important for us, that's why you're here. And that's where it took me, I was like, oh, I get now why I'm supposed to be here.
What's interesting is like, it's very evident that who you are as a person, Lyle Martin, is that what you do and like what drives you is love. And you can see that. And I think that's what we're getting at with the whole topic of linguistics.
Yeah.
Is you're learning what it's like for this people group to live their life, right? How to communicate that life, the worldview with which they see. And do you want some more?
I was saying this is fantastic. I was just gonna look at it.
Do you want to try the orange one? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Okay, we'll get the orange one out real quick. Oh geez, I gotta dig at the bottom of the. No, it's right here. Go ahead and open that one up. Let me know how it works.
But anyways, you're saying.
Yeah. No. Basically, let's see. Is it orange? No. No way. It's not orange.
What is this? How?
That's so funny.
Here,
I'll try it right now, yeah. I'll pour it in here too. Well, what I was saying though is that with linguistics, you're learning to understand a different people group, a different culture, a way they interact with the world. And in learning that, you become just a little bit more like them, which is, it's good.
Anyways, yeah, you learn to interact with them in a really...
It's like Fanta.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's so funny.
But not sponsored by Fanta.
Yeah.
But I love how it connects.
All the Zevia cans. Yeah.
But
here we go.
hopefully, not sponsored yet.
Yeah.
But hopefully.
We'll see.
I really love the way that you talk about the idea of like how it brings you better to understand the culture of people. this connects back to actually something within religion. And you and I were both part of a retreat recently, and one of the songs that came out was Sayo Lamang,
Yes.
which is a Filipino song talking about praising God. Funny thing though, Sayo Lamang isn't necessarily a worship song. It just, because of the Filipino connection with Catholicism, it comes out that way. In fact, Sayo Lamang was so popular, it was actually a movie.
Oh, really?
That they used. I think it was like an 80s
You know
or 90s.
what? Yeah, I listened to the soundtrack the other day with Fran.
Yeah.
She put it in the car. Yeah.
So, but something about that, every time I listen to it, I start sobbing. And I learned about it after I came back home. I played the song to my mom, and she said, every single time during communion, that's the song they play in our cathedral back home.
Wow.
And I thought about it, I'm just like, this song makes me cry every time because it's another affirmation about the fact that like there is something so special when you hear someone trying to speak to you in a language that you call home. And I think that's what love is to me. At the end of it, if you were going back to what you said before, how would you describe love? If I had to put it in one word, it's home. Love is home in the sense that it invites you. You may run away from it, but you'll always have a way back. It's always desiring for you to be there. That's what I see love is. And so when I heard Sayo Lamang, I started crying because I'm just like, I may not remember half of the phrases I use here because it's deep Tagalog for some of the phrases, but it still felt like I could feel the same way that I remember hearing my grandma talk to me in Tagalog when I was sick. It felt like I was at home, where somebody would talk to me in a way where I didn't need to understand the language. I could just feel the love. That's what home feels like.
It's so evident in how you talk and how you approach the world. What at the center of it is love. Like, that's the point I'm making. Is like, you're in international studies to unify, right? To understand other cultures, and you're learning languages which makes you a little bit more of like who they are as well. Kind of another unifying force, and like. Everything that you do, I can see, is very exemplary of an act of love, a pursuit of love.
I should hope so. I'm really glad that that's how you see it. I'm very honored by that.
Yeah, very much so. It's all in your interest, and like that's how it all ties back: the linguistics, international studies, and wherever God continues to bring you. It's evident that there's love at the center of it, and just a genuine desire to know more of this world. There's a love for God there because you recognize this beautiful creation that He has in all of us and all of our different cultures. To take care of the creation itself and a recognizing of that beauty. It's all there in what you have. I wanted to ask. I mean, so you are in international studies. That is what you're doing. What was the future that like you expect to have in that career?
That's interesting. I've been thinking about this a long time actually. I remember when I was at first I was like, I'm gonna become international law, and then I think it was I forgot why, but something clicked in me where it's like international law takes so long to get things done that I would feel very nervous about whether or not I would just be doing something or pushing a paper. And I guess from there, I thought about a lot of different motives. My short answer is I'm in between, I would say two main ones. A part of me wants to work in embassy, foreign relations between countries, because I would love for the US to get to a point where it can communicate with other countries and have that peaceful, supportive one another communication. Like I sound very much like the make love not war type person. To an extent, I am that
John
type
Lennon.
I'm very much that type of human being.
Yeah.
But I also do think like beyond that, I want to be able to greet someone from another country and make them feel welcomed, make them feel like they are homed. In the same way that if I go to another country, I would love to learn more about what makes them who they are. And so I want to learn the language or culture, that dynamic. So foreign relations has always spoken to me. But I also have this constant desire to teach. And I think that's something that like constantly hits back at me where it's like a part of me really just wants to be a professor. And I want to be able to like see the next generation of kids have their eyes light up.
So a university professor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like, I guess with the state of how I perceive high school and middle school, I feel like one of my perspectives on it is that it's very hard for me to be able to connect back constantly with somebody within that age group because I feel like a lot of people are either set, like as a teenager, you feel like I'm on top of the world, that mentality. And I know I have the capacity to do it now, but I don't know if I have that capacity for like 30 years later. Or would I become that like type of classic teachers, like very frazzled and just like, I'm doing it my way and that's it. I don't want to become like that. But as a professor, I think like, I don't know, something about when I was in that seminar of 200 plus kids, I got to be there in that single stand on my own, just listening to what the professor was saying. It's like click where it's like, I want to be able to be that type of professor where I can have a communication with any one of my students, but I could also be constantly open to expressing to them different perspectives about the world and the history of it. Like a perfect example, right, of something I loved about Korean is that when you say me in Korean, there's like two different ways. I would say 저, which is the formal, and 나, which is the informal. But there's a third one, which is commonly used, which doesn't even mean me, 우리. 우리 means us. But Korean identity is so collected in this idea of collectivism that we are a family unit, that when you say I don't say just for I speak for the family, 우리, us. So things like that, like learning about those little things that a professor can explain, I love the desire of being able to teach that to the next generation so they get a little bit of a glimpse into how complex and how beautiful this world can be. So like, I don't know. Those nuances, like, I feel like
it can really ignite
a lot of interest. Yeah. Like I feel like the way I talk right now, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if I didn't have my professors here in UCI, who unlocked those parts of me that wanted to explore, who wanted to learn more about the whys. And for example, I developed this theory about the Philippines and Korea, where it's like, the reason why, a part of why now I'm so determined in learning about Korea is because I project that the Philippines might go down a similar route or is trying to. And that if you want to do that to make
as Korea? Okay.
And like, so I also see as like what South Korea did maybe 20 and 30 years ago, Philippines has been doing for the past 10 years.
And what is that?
As in like the way that its structure has been forming, the governmental standards, the way it's doing its industrialization movements, things like that. Like those patterns feel like echoes.
Okay.
And my whole idea of it
is that a good thing for the Philippines?
I think yes and no.
Okay.
I think that any progress to some extent is good, but the worry is the consequences, or like the people who are leading within it. One of the things I guess I took personally now I want to do is I want to see what were the things that went wrong, what were the consequences or the sacrifices that Korea had to make.
Yeah.
How can you mitigate that for future countries who are trying to do the same thing?
Sure.
So just recently, there was an internal commission done in South Korea that confirmed that South Korean government after the Korean War had been selling off their babies to other countries for adoption.
Wow.
And the way that they would do it, and I had a whole class on this, which so it's like the moment I heard about it, I was like, I'm gonna do a deep dive to confirm if what I learned in class was real, and it was. What happened with that after the Korean War, you had a lot of kids who were either fatherless because of the war, or they were born from mixed culture because they were with a soldier parent and then a wife who was Korean. Or you would have some who were like coming from a very young age, right? So they couldn't support them. And the government would pressure those people to be like, hey, give up your kid. They're not going to be accepted here. They're going to have life hard here. And so there was a legal standard up to now, actually international law. To be an orphan is internationally defined as having only one parent. That doesn't make sense conventionally, but that was the legal reasoning, and that was used to justify why they were doing it originally.
Oh, dang.
And so there would be pressures, for example, of aunts who would just have enough of seeing their sister having to work to death and just take the kid and just bring it to adoption center, and they would ask no questions. They would just take the kid.
Dang.
And then they would falsify records historically about where the kid was from, so that it would look like they were actually a kid who was ready for adoption.
Oh, wow.
And ship them out. They would go under a completely different name.
And the South Korean government was doing this? Dang.
Partly, they were part of it. And the U.S. was one of the major people who received them. Because after their intervention in the South Korean War, a lot of, especially Christian communities, had this like almost religious guilt that they needed to adopt to save the lives of the kids.
Sure.
So a lot of them were getting kids, adopting kids, and raising them up, not knowing that they were not the kid that they had been connecting with, for the entrepreneurs and everything, right? Korea finally had the proof that there was done, like it was officially confirmed, I think a few days ago, weeks ago.
Oh wow.
In the same vein, you see that happening actually in other countries right now. Not in the Philippines, but I believe it was in the DRC, not in the DRC. It might have been the Republic of Congo. But there was a few other countries that the U.S. is also involved with right now in humanitarian aid, where you see the same system pattern of adoption, but it's falsifying the records. Or the reason why is because they want them to go to the U.S. to get education.
So is the U.S. at fault here, or are we just kind of the ones who are
I think that
accepting it?
to some extent, the fact that it was not monitored more carefully is a fault in itself. But I think that it goes both ways. And the victim of it, regardless of who is at fault, the victim of it is the kid and the families.
Yeah.
And so that was something where I want to be able to research these countries that went through these dramatic technological growths, because I want to understand what are the consequences or sacrifices have to be made. How do we mitigate that so that other families don't have to get torn apart?
Wow. Okay. So with regards to your careers,
Yes.
what I would suggest then is like when you look at these different micro histories and wanting to make an impact in a world, perhaps you could start like your life doing it hands-on yourself,
Yeah.
being that diplomat or working in these relations between countries,
Yeah.
so that you can share personal experiences
As a professor
later on.
I was definitely thinking about that as well. There's actually a corporation here nearby, I'd say in the Bay Area of California, called RAND. They are a non-government sort of government organization where they work with for example,
Are they an NGO?
I'd say they're an NGO. They work specifically with like governmental research and confirmation about things, right? So, for example, when there was a cyber attack done on the U.S., it was the RAND Corporation who went in and determined who it was that did it, that proved it or double checked.
Sure.
So that type of thing I would love to do as well. I would love to be able to work where I'm not working directly within the government, but I'm working alongside them.
Sure.
I would love to do that type of work as well. So things like that.
The kind of stuff where like the U.S. aid money was going to, just different sort of non-governmental agencies that were kind of like helping, not necessarily official government, but
Yeah. And I think a big part of that as well, I remember talking about it where it was like, I think one thing for me that I grew up with was the idea of like, I love the idea of sustainability. I desire consistency in my life. That's the type of human being I am. And I feel like I am afraid that every time, the type of field I'm already interested in is not sustainable normally. It's not like long-term, right? So I naturally want to cling on to things that sound like they would stay longer.
more sustainable.
Yeah. But even then, I don't even know if that's my real path.
So, are like is that when you say that, like, are you leaning towards like professor because you feel like that's more sustainable? Or like,
I would say yes and no. I think at the end of my days, I will become professor. But I think in between that, there is going to be a difference in between field.
sure.
And then I become a professor as I get older. I would probably say like in that moment in between, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Sure. I mean, in the pursuit of a professor, you have to do research, right?
Exactly.
You have to have field work. You're gonna have to write a dissertation.
So
you're gonna have to
either
have
way, I'm probably going to
experiences.
be working somewhere else anyways
Sure.
to get into that. So
Yeah.
I'll figure it out, I'm pretty sure.
Dang.
But yeah.
Wow. Well, Lyle, maybe we could wrap it up there. I
Yeah.
think we got like a good like look at who you are. Like, okay, you're a man of love, right? You know,
Yeah.
you're a man of recognizing the beauty in the stories that humanity in many parts of the world has to offer, connecting with those stories, maybe understand it in their own perspective as well,
Exactly.
and being able to share that on with the next future as well, share that same dream and inspiration. It seems like as a professor. Is there any other final words that you want to like share, suggest? Definitely, there's gonna be a part 2 of these with you as well.
Oh, yeah.
Down the line. So
I would say like one parting thing, I guess to end off with.
sure. To end off, yeah.
In The Little Prince, there's a story from the fox.
What is The Little Prince?
The Little
It's-
Prince
it's
is a book.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very popular French novelist who wrote it. And it talks about this little prince who comes from a different planet, who journeys through different places, eventually ends up on Earth, and how he meets this mechanic / pilot. and how they're in the desert stranded, and this pilot spends the rest, like the next 6 or 7 days, learning about the life of the prince, and ends up coming back to the rest of the world with a completely different view on life.
Okay.
One of the things, the journey of the prince, is that he meets a fox who asks him to tame him, become his best friend. And when the prince finally does, succeeds, the fox cries, he says, I'm going to miss you. It's like, why would you want to be friends with me if you're going to miss me, right? And he said, because now, every time I live my life now, it'll have a different meaning. All of the wheat that I used to see that had no meaning now reminds me of your hair. And I will therefore miss you and love you because of it. All of the days that I got to spend where I got to wait for you to visit me, I may not see you anymore, but I also have the longing and the joy of when you were there. And he said, to love something is to be able to see the things that are not visible to the eye. That is what I think is a good takeaway of everything we've sort of said in this. I mean, it's like, if you don't take everything in life just based on what you see, and that's the answer to it, there's so much more beauty that's hidden beneath, but it's maybe not visible to what we see. And that's, I think, what love does. It helps you to open up and to see those things beyond what your sight tells you. So yeah.
Wow. That is very profound. I didn't think we'd get to hit this point by the end of it, but yeah, I mean, you said it best, you know, love, humbling the heart, it opens the eyes.
Yeah.
But even then, what we cannot see through love, we can feel and we can understand in their own perspective as well. And we do this through language, right? We through this through teaching, growing up, and learning experiences, sharing experiences, and doing so with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you very much for the first episode on this podcast, and I hope to have you again soon.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
so much that we could talk about. We didn't even get into like geopolitics or AI.
I could definitely get into those
or
eventually.
we could even get into religion so much more.
I got you.
Theology and all of that. But man, just looking back on this video, what a great wealth of knowledge you have on linguistics, connecting with people and love. That's so great, man. Thank you.
Of course. Anytime, brother.
Appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.